What is that noise?
I don't know.
That was weird. Okay. Well, I'll just crop all this out.
It's Robert.
Oh, God. Maybe I'll leave it in then. All right. This is Histories and Mysteries. I'm one of your hosts, Ashley, and this is
Jessica. And on today's episode, Ashley will be talking about Henry VIII, which I'm pretty excited to hear about because I just know that he killed a lot of his wives. So I don't know much else about him other than that. So I'm fascinated to hear what's happening with that. And I'm going to be covering Robert the Doll. So if you don't want to be haunted, don't listen to this episode.
Well, listen to my part.
Although I'm fine so far. Yes, listen to Ashley's. But I mean, I did the research and I'm fine so far. So I think it'll be okay.
So I have to say, I don't know anything about Robert the Doll, and even a couple of podcasts that have done it, one of them being And That's Why We Drink, when did their story, they said at the beginning, like, hey, you know, some people get sick even from hearing this, and I definitely skipped that story.
Well, too bad for you this time.
Can't skip it this
Have
time.
to hear it directly.
And I have to hear it twice since I do the editing.
Have fun. Are you alone tonight?
Nope, I am not.
That's good. Me neither.
So we started a TikTok. So if any of you want to find us, we're just Histories and Mysteries on TikTok. We give you little like sneak peeks of our coming stories. I post some different things in there, some Fun Fact Fridays. I did a first day of fall. So if you would like to follow us on TikTok, please find us, look us up. We're there. We've only got like 12 followers so far, but we're racking them up day by day.
That's better than nothing. It's 1 week out, so
yes, true. So we're very excited about it. It's fun.
I figured out what the weird sound was.
What?
It was my CD-ROM drive. For some reason it decided it wanted to open.
Oh.
And my microphone was in the way, so it was making some funky noises.
Oh.
Fascinating. That's never happened.
So last week's episode, you talked about the Black-Eyed Kids, and when I was editing it, I kept having these like weird electronic sounds would come through, and then I would go back to repeat them and it wouldn't do it. It was really weird.
Oh, that's so creepy.
I know, I don't like it. So I'm wondering if anything will happen when I'm editing this one.
That's so weird. Oh my goodness. I don't like that at all. And didn't you think that there's like a black-eyed kid at your door?
Oh, my dog started barking. So I couldn't sleep that night. I woke up at actually, I don't think I ever went to sleep. And so around 5 a.m., I'm like, you know what? My husband got up for work. He had already left. I was still up. I was like, I'm not going to fall asleep. I'm just going to get up and edit the podcast. So it's still dark out. I'm by myself. My husband's at work. And my dog started growling and barking, and I about peed my pants. But come to find out, the neighbor's dog was out and was playing and barking, and so that's what she was barking at. But I was like, I swear to God, if my doorbell rings right now.
Never answering the door ever again.
Well, and I was right at the part where you were talking about the story where the black-eyed kids showed up at that guy's house at like 6 a.m. And it was like 5 something in the morning. I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, no. Oh, that's too funny.
So,
Oh
my
my
story
goodness.
this week is not very scary. I mean, it's scary in the way of he murdered lots of people, but it's not like super scary. But I got my sources from Ancient History Encyclopedia, the History Channel, good old Wikipedia, biography.com, and History Extra. So,
Ooh,
all
I
good
like History
histories.
Extra. Did you subscribe?
I did not.
Oh, you should use my login next time I'm subscribed to it.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
I subscribe because of the podcast.
Gotcha. So I would like to kind of preface this by saying that I've always been really fascinated with this time period. The Catholic Protestant War just fascinates me, and kind of how the politics behind it kind of really pushed this war ahead. Um, but, and I've talked about it 2 other times on this podcast, I'm telling you, if you haven't seen The Tudors, you have got to watch it. It's so good. And it's like what really made me interested in Henry VIII. And it's pretty historically accurate. Like, obviously, the conversations aren't, but they follow it pretty historically throughout. And um, Jonathan Rhys Meyers is,
Well, I mean, it's not very historically accurate because he's not as attractive as Jonathan.
well, he's not as attractive as Jonathan, but he was very attractive in his day. So it was a good casting, and the last season of it I felt kind of rushed it, but I think that's when Jonathan started really having problems with alcohol, and so I think they were trying to get the series done, so they kind of rushed through the
Yeah.
last season, but it's still really good. So, but
Good.
if you're not a huge fan of history or Henry VIII, if it doesn't sound like your cup of tea, I'm telling you, you gotta give it a chance. His real life story is crazy. It's just like a soap opera. It's great. So we're gonna get into it. So
It's a good thing they made it kind of like a soap opera.
yeah, it's totally a soap opera. I think it was like originally a Showtime or HBO or something series. There's a lot of sex in it, so probably not like a family friendly show, I should say, but it's real good. And it's got Henry
Oh my
Cavill.
goodness.
Was Henry Cavill? Was that how you say it? Cavill? I think so. Cavill.
Henry Cavill.
Cavill, yeah, he's in
Oh,
it. He's gorgeous.
I adore him. I just watched the that Enola Holmes movie
Oh yeah,
and
is it
he's
good?
playing Sherlock and uh, uh I I feel like it was like a weird like sequence of events, not just like I felt like it was kind of rushed. Like it should have
Okay.
been I think it was like a 2-hour movie, but like I just feel like it like I don't know, the whole thing of the movie was like her trying to find her mom and then she got sidetracked in the middle of it and then like the last 15 minutes she like saw her mom like, so
Yeah,
spoiler
I
alert.
gotcha.
But yeah.
uh,
So but Henry
Gotcha.
Cavill as Sherlock Holmes. Oh, oh my goodness. Oh,
One and this
give
one
me
he's
that.
in
Give
like
me a movie
period
with that.
clothing, so super sexy, and you get to see his butt. So okay. So Henry was never meant to be king. He was the second son, and therefore he obviously took a backseat to his older brother. His older brother's name was Arthur, and Arthur was married to Catherine of Aragon from Spain at the age of 15. So remember that all this stuff happened back in the 1500s, so getting married that young was quite normal. But unfortunately, Arthur died about 6 months after their wedding of the sweating disease. I kind of Googled what that was, and I don't think there's really like, I didn't really see like a modern day equivalent to it. So I'm not really sure what it was, but that's what he died of. Um,
I have it.
so you have the sweating disease?
Honestly, I like sweat like a mofo, and then I feel like I'm allergic to my own sweat 'cause I get all like rashy.
Oh gosh, yeah, that sucks. So
Yeah,
you are gonna die soon of sweating disease.
yeah, that's why I hate working out because then I sweat like crazy, and then I get like all itchy and rashy, and it just sucks.
That sounds awful. All right, so Henry VII, their father, wanting to keep the alliance with Spain, had his second son, Henry VIII, marry Catherine, the one that was previously married to his brother, who insisted that her marriage to
Yes.
Arthur was never consummated and she was therefore free to marry again in the eyes of the church. And this is very important to remember for down the road.
Wait, their marriage wasn't consummated,
Yeah, her and Arthur's.
but they but they were together for 6 months. Aren't you supposed to get that shit done right away?
So they had a they had a wedding ceremony. But they said that she swears up and down that it was never consummated, and Catherine was very religious, and so I cannot see her lying about that. But I don't know. I mean, they were only 15, and he was very sick almost their whole marriage, so
Mm-hmm.
who knows? But this will come into question in a little bit. Um,
Okay.
and poor Catherine had a pretty rough go of it. Her father wanted her to stay in England, but there was some courtly unrest, and then her mother passed away, so she was just kind of like stuck in limbo. Um, and once he was able to voice his opinion, Henry VIII said he didn't want to marry her, but he didn't really have a choice. So here she is, stuck in England. They want her to marry Henry VIII. He doesn't want to. She can't really go home. There's like some unrest going on in the court that she's in, and she's just kind of like sitting there, like, oh, okay.
Poor girl.
I don't know. So finally, Henry VII passed, and Henry VIII took the stage as King of England at the age of 17.
Wow.
Um, when he took the throne, he announced that he would marry Catherine because it was his father's dying wish. And at this point, Catherine was 23. So not too much older than him, but back in the day, that was enough um, for not to be a scandal, but just kind of like, oh. And it's so funny because it is known that she was older than him, and I always thought she was like really like a lot older than him. And they even the actress that they have cast for her in the Tudors is quite a bit older than Jonathan Rhys Meyers, and so I was picturing this like middle-aged woman, and she's only 23.
That's crazy.
But yeah, so when they got married, Henry was very athletic. He was taller than 6 feet. He was known to be very handsome and charismatic. People liked him. He was pretty intelligent. He liked to write poetry and sing songs, and he actually released a song that was really popular throughout the kingdom. So he was kind of a stud in his
That's
day.
that's weird.
And Catherine and Henry obviously started to try to have children because that was, the main job of the queen is to provide an heir. And unfortunately, they conceived three stillborn children, um,
Aw.
and then one son who died a few weeks after birth, and finally a baby girl named Mary,
Whoop
who
whoop.
we all know as Bloody Mary.
I'll talk about her next week.
Yeah. Yeah, she was I'll get to her a little bit later, but she's an interesting character. So, um, all in all, their marriage was pretty civil. I know that Catherine would often talk about, you know, um, uh, political things. I was couldn't think of the word. um, they would often talk about like political things, and she wasn't one to be silent. She was devoutly Catholic, and she raised her daughter Mary to be Catholic as well. But and I think in some way Henry really did respect Catherine for a while. They were married for a few years, and all in all, people said it was pretty civil, pretty happy. They had obviously they had marital relations since they had all those stillborns and miscarriages. So I think it was altogether just a pretty amicable marriage for the time.
That's good.
Um, yeah, but Henry did take mistresses, which was pretty common back in the day for the king to take mistresses, and Catherine was able to look the other way. But one of these mistresses got pregnant by Henry and had a son.
Ooh.
Yeah, so he has this son by a mistress. He immediately claims him. He doesn't illegitimize, he's legitimate. And he is raised pretty wealthy and well off. So we fast forward. So Henry's 34 now. Um, so he's been married to Catherine since he was 17. He's now 34. He's been doing a lot of the like battle He-Man stuff, and he's like, yeah, I'm awesome. And from what I've read, most kings were pretty full of themselves, but I think Henry was feeling himself pretty well. So,
Little small man complex.
well, he was taller than 6 foot, so he wasn't really small, but
I'm not talking about his height, you wackadoodle.
well, we don't know that.
Why not?
I don't talk about that in the history books, Jessica.
Well, maybe they should make it more interesting. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. His life is very fascinating without his penis size.
Yeah. But I bet it was small.
Probably makes sense.
Yeah. But he was I think he was pretty full of himself. He was basically pampered his whole life, and he was winning a lot of these battles, and the people loved him, and he was kind of like a heartthrob. He could get whatever woman he wanted. But his wife was not giving him a son, but he had a son, so he knew he could have a son. And so it was obviously Catherine's fault, right?
Yes, obviously.
I say that while rolling my eyes. So one of his mistresses was Anne Boleyn's sister. And when he met Anne Boleyn, things kind of changed forever. And I know that Anne Boleyn kind of gets a bad rap for kind of being like slutty or, conniving, but bitch worked with what she had. I mean, back in the day, women were not going to amount to much. They couldn't do much. And she found a way to make the King of England divorce his wife when divorce wasn't even a thing and become queen. Like, I don't know. I think she's pretty badass. But
That is pretty dope.
yeah, so King Henry was used to getting everything he wanted, especially with women. But Anne Boleyn was like, nah, I am not going to sleep with you. I'm not going to be your mistress. I saw what happened to my sister. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to sleep with you unless I am your wife. I am not going to be your mistress.
What happened to her sister?
She was just like disgraced,
Oh,
after being with the king, and no man wants to touch you after that because you're not clean anymore.
yeah.
And so she didn't want that. And I know at a time, she even left the court for like a year to get away from the situation. And people, so there's two schools of thought on Anne Boleyn. One was that she knew exactly what she was doing. She was worming and twisting her way in. And one that she really was trying to rebuff his advances and not give in because he was married and she didn't know what would happen. I like to think she was conniving and twisting her way through because it makes her so much more interesting, I think. But
Yeah.
um so during this year that she was gone from court, they were writing love letters back and forth, and they have Henry's. They don't have hers, but they have Henry's, and they're pretty mushy. And she held out and she said, I am not going to do this. So Henry wanted to figure out a way to get an annulment from his marriage from Catherine because he thought with his penis.
Like most men.
Yeah, exactly. So Henry wanted to get out of his marriage, and he got in his head that Catherine wasn't conceiving in a male heir because God was punishing him because he married his brother's wife. And in the Bible, under Leviticus, it says, if a man takes his brother's wife, it is severe defilement, and he has disgraced his brother. They shall be childless.
Wow.
But the question is, did he really think that this was the case, or was he just an easy way for him to get out of marriage? Because he did have a child with Catherine, it just was a girl.
Exactly. And he had another child with another mistress, so.
Yeah, exactly. So, either way, he latched onto this idea and he believed that the Pope would annul his marriage because it was wrong in the eyes of God, is what he said.
Mm.
Uh, and so he started working with the cardinal at the time to kind of help him get his case together and appeal to the Pope. During this time, he eventually took away the Queen's rooms and sent her away. He was just like, you know what? Bye. And then gave the rooms to Anne.
What in the world?
Yeah, so he just kicked Catherine out, gave the rooms to Anne. And she knew Anne wasn't a dummy. I mean, she was educated. She was very well educated for women of the time. She knew that Henry could get a divorce and she could, or an annulment, and she could be queen if the Protestant religion was the Church of England and not Catholicism.
Oh my goodness.
So she started to, yeah, so she started to speak to Henry of the Protestant religion. And Henry had a couple advisors that were Protestant or like Protestant sympathists. So they really liked this. Sympathists? That's not a word. Sympathizers.
There we go.
And they really liked this idea too. So they kind of started talking about the Protestant religion as well. Um, Now, mind you, at this time, England was deeply, deeply entrenched in the Catholic Church and the Pope. Henry was deeply religious, believing that God appointed him as king, and even wrote a book attacking Martin Luther and his church, the Protestants, earning him the title of Defender of the Faith from the Pope. So, very involved in the Catholic Church. And Henry believed that the Pope would grant him his annulment and everything would be fine. And, it wouldn't have to come to that. But it was just kind of bad timing because Catherine's nephew, who was at this time the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, was against this idea, and they had taken over Rome, and so the Pope was kind of at their mercy. So he kind of had to do what they said. Um, so he decided that he would not grant Henry's wish, which was basically telling a spoiled child no. So Henry threw a fit and put the cardinal that was helping him on trial for treason. And the poor guy died in jail waiting his trial.
That's horrible. I hate
Yeah.
people.
And I know. And I don't know much about Cardinal Wolsey, but in the Tudors, they don't make him out to be a great guy. He seems very corrupt, and I think he was pretty corrupt at the time. But still, that's not really a great reason to die.
No, like a toddler being told no.
Exactly. So Henry appointed a new cardinal, which I would not want to be that guy. I'd be like, no, thank you. But this new cardinal said, hey, you shouldn't have to answer to the Pope. You're the king. And Henry was like, dude, you're so right. So Henry declared himself head of the Church of England.
Oh my
He's like, you
goodness.
know what? England's going to have its own church. I'm going to be head of it. So no one is above me but God.
Yep, small man complex.
Yeah. During this time, he married Anne in a secret ceremony. Um, Mind you, he was still married to Catherine.
So, did Anne not know this, or
No, she knew,
no?
but she wanted to be queen.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so so he married Anne in a secret ceremony, and then 4 months later, his marriage was officially annulled to Catherine by Thomas Cranmer, the archbishop that was appointed by Henry. Then, with the passing of the Act in Restraints of Appeals, it was saying that was the act saying that Henry was the head of the church. Catherine couldn't appeal. Who do you appeal to? Henry. He's the head of the church now. Not going to matter.
Haha.
So, yeah. So she couldn't appeal. The annulment was finalized. Her daughter Mary was declared illegitimate, and she was stripped of her title.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, Henry also started tearing down the Catholic monasteries throughout England, and taking their wealth for himself. So, I think the Catholic monasteries were pretty corrupt at this time, so I think they were pretty wealthy, and so he was taking all their wealth and just lining his own pockets with it.
Understandable.
Um, and poor Catherine, this lady, she was shifted around from house to house, unable to see her daughter ever again. That was like one of Henry's punishments to her for not accepting the annulment, until, like, she wouldn't just say, yeah, that's fine, and walk away. Like, he had to go through all of that, because she wouldn't. She's like, no, I'm your wife. I am the Queen of England. And he was like, all right, well, I'm making up a new church.
Yeah. Good
So
luck.
he, yeah. So he shifted her from house to house. She wasn't able to see her daughter. Finally, she was confined to her residence and died 3 years after the annulment.
Well, that's sad.
Um, yeah, and some say that she was poisoned by Anne or Henry, and some say she died of cancer. And the reason, I kind of think, well, so the people loved Catherine. They loved Catherine, and they did not like Anne Boleyn. So I could see why they would want her dead, so that the people would stop focusing on Catherine and start to focus on Anne. Um, but I do know that apparently during the autopsy, they found that her heart was black, which is a sign of some kind of rare cancer, I guess modern doctors say. So I don't know, poison or cancer, unsure, but I do know that the next day, the next day after her death, Anne and Henry wore yellow, which in England is a color of celebration. In Spain is a color of mourning. So why they decided to wear it, we'll never know, but they also held a lot of festivals to
Oh.
celebrate her death.
Well, that,
Yeah.
I guess, solves it.
Yeah. So now that Anne and Henry are officially married, Anne gives birth to Elizabeth I, aka our Virgin Queen Elizabeth, who we all know so much about.
Oh, I talked about her.
Yeah, you did.
I forgot
This
about
is her
that.
mom. Yeah.
Fun. Okay.
And I think in a lot of ways, Elizabeth kind of turned out like Anne, like feisty, smart, opinionated. Um, and Anne was not the meek, feeble woman that she was supposed to be at this time, just quiet, into fashion and jewelry, just be the queen, don't have anything to do with politics. But she wasn't like that. She was opinionated. She would talk to Henry about it. And so this caused a lot of tension between her and Henry, because Henry didn't want to be told anything from a woman.
Of course not.
Yeah. And she also only gave birth to Elizabeth and had 3 miscarriages after. So again, he was still looking for that male heir that he wasn't getting. And we know he wanted that more than anything. So guess what? His eyes began to wander to other women.
I'm confused though. Like, doesn't he have a male heir? Like,
So he has the one that he had with that mistress, but his claim to the throne could be questioned easily, because of the fact that it was not, he was not conceived in marriage. And back then, the heir conceived in marriage would be a lock to the throne. But if you're conceived from a mistress, some kings wouldn't even recognize you. They'd be like, "Nah, you're illegitimate. You don't even get anything."
But he made him legitimate, so I'm just confused.
He did make him legitimate, but if Henry were to die, because that's when his heir would take over, there's a lot of people that could come to say that he's not the rightful heir because he wasn't conceived in marriage, but so and so's the rightful heir because, he's the king's nephew and he's full blood royal or whatever.
Okay.
So it's just, yeah, it's just not as solid as a son from the marriage of the king and queen would be.
Okay.
So he was really looking for that. And so while married, he began courting Jane Seymour. And he decided that he wanted to marry her instead. He was over Anne. So this woman that he literally separated the country from their church for, he was over it. And he needed a reason, though, to end his marriage with Anne. So one story said also that Henry gave a locket to Jane with like his little photo in it, and she would open and close it around Anne, and Anne would get really pissed and ripped the locket off of Jane's neck. So Anne was not okay with his mistresses.
No, clearly not.
But Henry started to say that he was forced into this marriage with Anne by means of deception or spells.
Oh my goodness, she's a witch.
Yep, exactly. And Jane was moved into the royal quarters as a further slight to Anne. And Anne's brother was also denied a prestigious court honor. So Anne kind of knew this was it. Jane had taken over. Anne was on her way out. She had false claims of adultery, incest, and conspiracy made against her. And there is a character in here named Thomas Cromwell, and he was an ally of Anne, but she started to pass a legislation called the Poor Law, which stated that local officials must find work for those who were unemployed. And the law said that the new governing council would be created, and apparently this governing council threatened a governing council that Cromwell already headed up. So he saw Anne's legislation as a threat and wanted to get rid of her. So some people say that he was the one that kind of started these rumors, and some people say he had nothing to do with it. Again, we'll never know.
Yeah, men.
But they did claim that she had an, I know. They did claim that she had an incestual
Incestual?
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 Relation with her relationship with her brother, but there's zero evidence of that. I think they were just pulling at straws. So they threw her away into the tower awaiting her trial, and she was unanimously convicted, and off with her head it went. So she died.
Anne. How old was she?
She was, I don't know, Jessica. Hold on, let me look it up. How old Anne Boleyn when she died? 29.
Wow, that's young.
Yeah, so Anne Boleyn was 29 when she died. Wait till I get to his second to last wife. Whew. So within days of Anne's execution, Henry was married to Jane Seymour. Which at this point, man, I would not want to marry him.
No.
I would be so scared. He threw away his first wife, murdered his second wife.
Yeah, just be so paranoid.
Yeah. And she did something no other woman had been able to do. She gave Henry a male heir, who they named Edward VI.
Oh, him.
Yeah.
That was a dramatic response.
Um, so Jane Seymour was only with Henry for a year and a half before she died. She died of childbirth complications from having Edward. Um, Henry always said that she was the love of his life, but I kind of think she just wasn't around long enough for him to get sick of her.
Yeah, I mean, he gave him a son, so
Yeah. So I think that he just kind of rested it on that, like, oh, she gave me a son, and then she died afterwards, so he didn't have to like deal with her. So, and because because she wasn't married to him very long, she was actually never crowned queen.
oh shit.
So she never got that title.
So is like his Edward would be his legitimate heir though because they were married.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Weird
even though the other
British
one is
politics.
older, yeah, he doesn't count.
Okay.
So Henry's next wife is probably my favorite. It was a political marriage, and it was to Anne of Cleves. And Anne was this poor girl. She got such a bad rap. She was said to have been no great beauty. So Henry wasn't like super excited to marry her.
That's mean.
But when his two rivals, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V and French King Francis I, signed a treaty, he needed more allies. So his marriage to Anne would boost the Reformation in England, so he decided to go ahead with it. And Thomas Cromwell, remember him from kind of
Mm-hmm.
backstabbing Anne of Boleyn? I keep saying
Mm-hmm.
Anne of Boleyn, it's just Anne Boleyn. Really wanted this marriage to happen to help his religious fight because he really wanted more Protestant type views. And so he started claiming that Anne was actually very beautiful.
Fascinating.
And yeah. And Henry, being the shallow man that he was like, you know what? I'm going to commission a portrait to be made of Anne. So the artist, who was pushed by Cromwell to make her prettier than she may have been, created this portrait, and they said he was a bit too forgiving.
Oh.
Um, and after seeing the portrait, Henry said, sure, I'll marry Anne because she's not hideous. And when she finally arrived at the castle, Henry was appalled. He said that she smelled and had saggy breasts.
Ew. I can't
Yeah.
even find her portrait.
And it's not I so people said that she actually wasn't that ugly. And before she had married Henry, she was known to be kind of pretty. I mean, nothing like to write home about, but not hideous by any means. I think her portrait's in the Louvre, but I'm not
Oh,
sure.
she's pretty.
Yeah, I mean, she's not like, she's no Jennifer Aniston, but she's, you know.
She's more attractive than he is.
Oh, for sure. I'm gonna get into that right now. Um, so many historians also think that he thought her to be so ugly because he already had eyes for another woman, uh, Catherine Howard, who would be his next wife after Anne. But he wanted to have this political marriage to get more allies. And so poor Anne was forever known as Henry's ugly wife because of his reaction to her, even though, like I said, I don't know that this was necessarily accurately portrayed of her. But yeah,
Yeah.
she's known as the ugly one. And um
Oh, lovely.
and so Henry was super pissed that she was ugly. Okay, but let's talk about Henry at this time. So Anne was 24. Henry is 48. He had a pussing, decaying wound in his leg from a jousting accident from
Ew.
years ago. Yeah, and I guess this was like the second time that he got wounded in the same spot, so the doctors couldn't get it to heal, they couldn't get it to close. So basically for the rest of his life, and this happened when he was relatively young. I think it happened in like 37, 1537. So he was relatively young at the time, and it just it just never closed up. So over time, more skin was decaying, the infection was getting deeper and worse. It caused him a lot of pain.
Good.
And so he was said to have smelled really bad because he smelled like decaying flesh.
Bleh. That's gross.
Yeah. So he was 48, smelled of decaying flesh. When he became king, he was 17, and his waist was 32 inches, or 81 centimeters. So, like, duh, he was skinny. He was 17. He was athletic. Weren't we all at that time, right? Um,
Yes.
but at the point he marries Anne, he is 52 inches, which is 132 centimeters, which no fat shaming. I mean, you do you, boo
No.
boo. But probably don't be smelly, old, and pretty large and be talking about this 24-year-old and how she has saggy breasts.
No, that's rude.
Yeah. So Henry wanted to find a legal way to avoid the marriage because I'm sure treaties had already been signed by the time she had gotten there. You know, things were already forged and moving. And so he wanted to find a legal way to get out of the marriage, not have it happen, to avoid it. But he really couldn't do so without upsetting his alliance with Germany, and he needed that alliance. So instead, he did what any normal man would do, and arrested the Thomas Cromwell, who really pushed the marriage, for multiple charges, and then executed him.
Oh my.
Yeah. So, as for Anne, I think they were married for about 6 months. He had her removed from court and stay in Richmond Palace, where she learned that her marriage was being called into question because she was once betrothed to another man. And so apparently that became a thing. I don't know. But again, these women are not dumb. And Anne was like, you know what? Go ahead, you can have your annulment. I don't want to end up like your other wives. Like, you're good. We
Yeah.
can be annulled. It's cool, dude. And it worked out for her. She was actually treated really well after this. She got to keep all of her royal jewels. She got to keep the Richmond Palace. Henry gifted her with several other properties. She was
Wow.
given the title of the king's sister, which put her above all others except for his children and like whoever he married. Um,
Wow.
and one of the residents he gave her was Anne Boleyn's old residence.
Ha! That's so funny.
Yeah, I know. And apparently, her and Henry remained pretty close friends. And she would come to court often. She was close with his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. And Anne outlived Henry. And then when Henry's son took over, he took away some of her properties and kind of viewed her as a nuisance. But then when Queen Mary became queen, because she was so close with Anne, she once again was privileged, and died of a quick illness at the age of 41. So she did the best out of all his wives.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. So just granting his annulment, she led a pretty happy life.
Good.
So back to Henry, because he's still got 2 more marriages to go.
Oh my goodness.
So 19 days after his annulment to Anne of Cleves, he married. Are you ready for this?
Sure.
Because at this point, he's 48, 49.
Okay.
He married 17-year-old Catherine Howard.
Ew.
Yeah. Um, so Catherine was 17. She was naive. She was young. She was dumb. I mean, she's a kid. And
Yeah.
she had an affair with Thomas Culpeper. And some people took notice and began blackmailing her to keep her secret. So, do this for me or I'm going to tell. And she was also supposedly with Thomas before her marriage to the king. And when news of this they also found a love letter in Thomas Culpeper's room from her. So when news of this reached the king, off with her head. So she lost her head too.
Oh my goodness.
So poor girl 17 killed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Henry's final wife was Catherine Parr. She had been married 2 times prior. Both those husbands had passed away, not suspiciously by any means, but just over a year after our 17-year-old's execution, he married this Catherine. And Catherine was really well liked. She had a close relationship with Henry's children. She even got him to legitimize marrying Elizabeth. So she
Okay,
was
yeah.
really the person to thank for Elizabeth's long reign.
Yeah.
Um, and so prior to marrying Henry, she was kind of being courted by Thomas Seymour, and she decided to marry Henry instead. You don't really say no to the king. And after Henry died, she then married Thomas Seymour.
Oh, good. She got her happily ever after.
Well,
Oh, okay. Never mind.
well. There's a huge scandal that happens. I didn't go into it because this is already kind of a long story, but it has to do with Elizabeth and um, her and her husband, and Elizabeth being like kind of coerced into kind of flirting with her husband, and it's a huge mess, but it's fascinating. If you want to look into it, definitely look it up. But anyway, so she did end up married and she died. She ended up getting pregnant, had one daughter who she named Mary, and then she died like a few years later. So she didn't have a horrible life, but there was that big old scandal. So, um, but let's talk about Henry's decline. So at the end of his life, his waist was 54 inches or about 140 centimeters, and he had to have help by mechanical inventions to move around the castle.
Wow.
Um, he was also covered in painful pus filled boils, and some think that he probably suffered from gout as well. Like I said, his wound came from a jousting accident, and apparently after this jousting accident, his mood changed too. So he probably had some. He got hit and he was unconscious for like 2 hours afterwards.
Ooh.
And this was when he was with Anne Boleyn, and this is when she had one of her miscarriages. So, uh, I would think that he has some kind of frontal lobe damage because afterwards they said, he was different. Like his mood was more erratic, more angry, quick tempered than he had been prior.
Yeah.
Um, his mental health declined as well. As he aged, he became suspicious, he became paranoid. I mean, he was in constant pain. So it just was all bad. And um, finally, at the age of 55, King Henry VIII passed away. Um, his son took over, King Edward, at the age of 9. So I think Jane Seymour, who was, or I'm sorry, not Jane Seymour, Catherine was his like regent for a little bit because he was so young.
Yeah.
And he ruled for about 6 years before he died. And so then Mary, aka Bloody Mary, took over after that, and she ruled for 5 years before her death, when finally Queen Elizabeth I came to the throne for 45 years, ending the Tudor line.
Nice.
And that's the story of Henry VIII.
Woohoo! Very fascinating.
Crazy.
It's funny because I always thought that there were more like beheadings, I guess, just based off of like what I've
Yeah,
heard
he
of
only
him.
beheaded 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he
Very.
beheaded a lot of people that he blamed for his marriages, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I just thought it was a little
So,
bit more gore, blood and gore, and Like, I mean, none of his wives were like
Nope,
very
just a lot of
fortunate, but
politics.
yeah, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, well, good story.
Yeah, now let's hear about this haunted thing that's gonna haunt me for the rest of my life.
Woo-hoo! Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
I am going to be talking about Robert the Doll, as we have mentioned. And I got my sources from All That's Interesting, because we all know I love them. The author's name is Katie Serena. And then I got it from atlasobscura.com. The writer for that was Andy Wright. Ghosts and Gravestones of Key West. And then Film Daily. And the writer was Ashley Makey. So I'm
Fellow
just going
Ashley.
to pop on into it because this is a bumpy, it's a short ride, but it's a crazy ride. So
Short but bumpy.
yeah, I got like full body shudders when I was researching this, so hopefully you do too.
Cool.
So, since 1904, this doll has been blamed for mischievous acts in Florida, and it has a long list of alleged crimes. Now, if you've never seen a picture of Robert the doll or even heard of him, he's not what you would think when you picture a regular doll. Have you seen a picture of him, Ashley?
No.
Look it up. Look up Robert the doll.
It's gonna be on my phone now. Oh God, why? Oh my. Why would you make me do that?
For that reaction.
Why does he have so many holes in his face?
Right? Oh my goodness.
Oh.
All right, so
Now I feel sick. Thanks.
if you aren't going to look up the picture to the listeners, I will explain what he looks like. So he is life-sized. So like child life-sized.
What?
Yep.
Oh
So like
gosh.
4 feet. And he looks almost human.
Oh.
He is now dressed in his deceased owner's clothing, which was a sailor's costume, by the way.
Yeah, I noticed that. That was
I'm like
creepy.
nervously laughing. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, no, it was his owner's clothing from when he was a kid. He dressed him in it. He has beady black eyes,
Yep.
pinholes for a nose, brown nicks or scars all over his face, and he is filled with straw. So there's also a very creepy stuffed dog that sits on his lap. And even the dog is very creepy looking. It has like a long tongue that just hangs out of its mouth, and it's just like beady black eyes, and it's just
Leave the doggies alone.
Yeah, everything's just creepy.
Yeah, I did not like that.
No, right? Isn't it creepy? Yeah. Now look up the movie version of him.
What movie was it from?
So look up Robert the Doll, the movie. It's called Robert.
He looks like kind of like Chucky, but it looks like if Chucky and Annabelle from the movie had a baby. That's what he looks like.
Yes. Yes, and like there is speculation that Robert the Doll kind of brought on the idea of Chucky.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
ironic that you said that.
I gotta clear it out of my history now.
Say thank you, Robert.
Stop it!
Or he will haunt you.
Is that really the thing?
Yeah, you have to thank him and like be respectful and stuff, and you can't
Oh
make fun
God,
of
I was
him.
not
And,
respectful. Thank you,
or he'll
Robert.
haunt
I'm
you.
so sorry. You're beautiful.
She means it, Robert. The legend says that he isn't just a haunted doll, but that he is malevolent and he likes hurting everybody around him. Now, where did this evil doll come from, you ask? So, There is debate on whether it was given to Robert Eugene Otto, who I will be referring to as Otto, as a gift from his grandfather from Germany.
It's a mean grandpa.
Sure, he looked nicer back then. Or whether it was given to him by a maid in retaliation, as the family was known to mistreat their help. And she
Oh,
cursed the doll with voodoo magic, thus creating this malevolent entity. So on her way out from being fired, she gave this doll to Robert as a gift. So there's like
dang.
those two different stories. Um, yeah. So the researchers at the museum that he's now housed, Fort West Martello Museum, if anybody wants to go see him, presume he was never intended on being a doll in the first place. So like he wasn't mass produced. Like he's a very unique doll in that he was the only one made. So he was likely part of a window display of clowns or jesters, which kind of suits his mischievous behavior, but also kind of makes it creepier.
Yeah, I don't like any of that.
So yeah, don't like that. Before our beloved Robert the doll became the thing of nightmares he is known for today, he was Robert Otto's best friend. He named the doll after himself. However, the original Robert went by Gene, or I'm going to call him Otto. He put it in his own clothes and he brought it with him wherever he went.
That's a creepy little boy.
Yeah. Like naming the doll after yourself is just a
And like
weird
carrying him
thing to
around
do.
and dressing him in your clothes, like that's weird.
It was his best friend. So this part's so creepy. So his parents would catch him whispering to Robert, and they thought that this was like all in good fun until they eventually heard a deep voice answering back.
What?
Yeah, like a voice that like a child of his age like could not register with his vocal cords.
Oh, that gave me chills.
Right. They also witnessed Robert speaking and saw his expressions change.
No, I refuse. That's not. Nope.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So this friendship obviously was turning into a very unhealthy one, with Otto
Sorry.
referring to Robert in the first person as though it wasn't a doll at all, but a live person. It even got to the point that Otto made a special room for Robert in the attic, equipped with furniture, toys, and a teddy bear. Ugh,
No.
I'm getting so creeped out.
It's just
Getting
like,
full body chills again.
I mean, even if this doll wasn't malevolent, like this is just a creepy ass kid.
Oh, yes. Eventually, things took a turn for the worse around the Otto home. One story is that Otto's parents woke up in the middle of the night to Otto's screams for help, and when they went to check on him and were finally able to get the locked door open, Otto was surrounded by overturned furniture, and Robert was sitting at the end of his bed staring at him as Otto was curled up in a ball of fear. So just have lovely old Robert sitting at the end of the bed staring at Otto, and all
Yeah,
this like
that's
furniture is
awful.
just like scattered around him. Yeah, especially in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I'm definitely making a face right now that you guys can't see.
Yeah, that's why she's not reacting, because she's just making faces.
It's not a happy face.
She's not comfortable right now. It's a very uncomfy face. Oh my goodness. Other strange things started to happen, such as mutilated toys showing up in the house, with Otto simply stating, Robert did it.
Or
Yeah,
Otto did it and he's just a creepy serial killer.
exactly. One story states that Otto's aunt, who was living with the family at the time, suggested that Robert be locked up in the attic. That very same night, Otto's aunt died in her sleep.
No. Are you kidding me?
No.
That's terrifying.
So it was a mystery whether he did it or not, but the family brought him back down to Otto's room when it happened just to try and appease him because they were afraid that that's why it happened.
Yeah, I would do that too.
Yep. When Otto grew up, he studied at the Academy of Fine Arts in Chicago and the Arts Students League in New York, where he met his wife, Anne. He then went back to his childhood home, being reunited with Robert. And if anybody's wondering, Otto's home is now a haunted bed and breakfast.
Where is it located?
Key West.
Oh.
Otto supposedly, once he moved back into the house, resorted back to his old ways around Robert, which included carrying him around and giving a place to sit at the dinner table and having him sit in a chair beside their bed at night while they slept.
Okay, I'm sorry, but if my husband, a grown ass man, is carrying around a little boy doll with him everywhere, I'm out.
Right? And like, especially having him like sleep next to you in bed, just like staring at you.
Oh, no, thank you.
Yeah, not down for it.
No.
And so his wife felt really uneasy around Robert, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it, so she had Otto lock Robert upstairs in the attic.
Ooh, he don't like that.
No, he doesn't like that. But I mean, he was locked like up in the attic in a box while Otto was at school for years,
Oh,
and
okay.
like nothing happened to his parents. So,
Okay.
yeah. So I don't know. I think it was just that one like incident with his aunt, and I think it was just a fluke, but
Gotcha.
creepy coincidence.
Yeah.
Now that Robert was no longer being carried around by Otto everywhere he went, he took up a permanent seat in a chair facing out of an upstairs window where he could be observed by passerby below. It seemed, though, that Robert was not happy with his new residency, and visitors to the home would hear pacing back and forth, footsteps, and devilish giggling up in the attic.
I would not be a visitor to that home.
No, and it was like devilish child's giggling.
Oh, no, thank you.
Ugh, gross. I like this story. A story goes that a plumber was working on the home when no one else was home, but he could distinctly hear children's laughter. When this worker looked around the room for the source of the laughter, he observed that Robert was now moved from one side of the window to the other side, and objects that were once in Robert's lap were now on opposite sides of the room as if he had thrown them there.
Did that guy like run out screaming? Because that's what I would do.
I have no idea. I hope so. I hope he did.
Yeah.
People also eventually stopped walking past the house because they swore that Robert would disappear and reappear facing a completely different direction, and that his gaze would follow them as they walked by.
You know his house was one of those like creepy houses for the neighborhood kids that are like, I dare you to walk by that house. Like I dare you to go up and touch the
Exactly.
porch.
Honestly, though, but like I would never do that.
No.
I feel like I'm too scared. No thanks.
That's how horror movies
I've
start.
like always been creeped out by dolls forever. Exactly. Dolls are just creepy, man.
Yeah.
It was also said by the children walking by that Robert would be mocking them from an upstairs window, which Otto said was impossible since he was supposed to be locked in the attic. However, to his dismay, Robert was indeed in a rocking chair facing out of a window in the upstairs bedroom and not in the attic where he was originally placed.
Oh.
Yeah, so he like moved on his own to this downstairs bedroom.
I do think it's funny that he's just sitting there mocking kids.
Yeah, like Nana Nana Poo Poo.
Yeah, that's funny.
Oh my goodness. Otto repeatedly locked him back up in the attic, only for him to repeatedly reappear in the bedroom window.
Ugh.
Those visiting the house would say that they could hear footsteps coming from up in the attic, and items would move around the home with no explanation of how it happened. It is also said that whenever someone badmouthed Otto, Robert's expression would change.
Well, at least he's
So,
protective
like,
of his
he'd get
buddy.
angry. Yeah. In 1974, Otto died, and the house was purchased by a woman named Myrtle Reuter, which now meant that Robert had a new owner. Myrtle had a 10-year-old daughter who was delighted to find Robert in the attic.
Nope.
Her delight, however, quickly grew to dread as she continuously woke up in the middle of the night screaming that Robert had been moving about the room on his own.
Oh.
To this day, the daughter will say that the only memory she has of her time with the doll was that it tried to kill her.
Oh my gosh. No, thank you.
Robert lived under Reuter's care for 20 years, And it said that she even brought him with her when she moved to a new home.
What? Why?
I don't know. She's a wackadoodle, I guess. Maybe it was like before things got like super bad. I don't know. Or she just didn't believe in it. Who knows?
Hmm.
Because like she was the mom, right? So it's not like Robert was like distressing her. It was just
Yeah,
her
but
daughter.
like, even still, it's not like it's a pretty antique or whatever that you want to take with you.
I know. Leave it in the house like everybody else did.
Yeah.
One night she woke up to child's laughter and saw Robert the doll at the end of her bed holding a knife.
No!
Yeah. So after that, it was kind of a last straw, and she donated Robert to the Fort East Martello Museum, where he now sits today. She claimed that the doll was indeed haunted and that he used to move around the house on his own as he pleased. The museum indeed took Robert, assuming that Reuter's claims were utter nonsense and that the doll was simply just a doll.
Hmm.
Almost immediately, though, like hundreds of people lined up to see Robert, and even stranger letters being addressed to Robert began arriving at the museum.
He can't read.
I know, but they can read it to him. These letters these letters were either apologies for not treating Robert with respect when they visited him, because it said that you need to ask him permission before taking a picture or he will curse you,
Oh.
or to ask for or to ask for Robert to place a curse on someone they didn't like. So they'd be like, I'm sorry for disrespecting you, or it's along the lines of, I hate this person, place a curse on them, I want them dead or hurt or whatever.
Ooh.
So, like, that's how much people believed in Robert. Since arriving at the museum, Robert has received nearly 1,000 letters. He also receives candy. As people found out, he has a sweet tooth.
What? He can't eat.
I know. I think it was kind of like something that Otto used to feed him was candy. So I don't know.
Okay.
Still super weird.
Yeah.
They even send him money, and sometimes they even send him the occasional joint.
I mean, bro's gotta chill.
Right? um as a caution, the staff do not consume any of the candy that is sent to Robert.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
By the way. Yeah. Robert has appeared on TV shows. He's had his aura photographed. Jeepers. Uh, he is one of the stops on a ghost tour, and he has inspired a 2015 horror movie titled Robert. Like Annabelle, however, they did not use his true likeness in the movie, which is frustrating because I think he looks a lot creepier in his true form.
Yeah.
So, and he was one of a kind, so it's not like it would be like super hard to be like, hey, toy company, can we use the likeness of this creepy ass doll?
Yeah, because I feel like the one in the movie is more like Hollywood cinematic. Like, it doesn't look as real or as unassumingly creepy as the real one.
No, that's the problem. Like,
Yeah.
sorry, everyone. The original Robert is just like so unassumingly creepy. Like, he
Yeah.
just looks like an innocent child's toy, whereas the Robert in the movie looks like this sinister, creepy ass ventriloquist dummy.
Well, that's kind of the
Like,
same thing with Annabelle. Like, Annabelle in real life is a Raggedy Ann doll,
yeah,
which is super, normal. And in the movie, she's like a creepy one.
yeah, and it makes sense because like my husband explained it to me that like Raggedy Ann dolls are still like being sold, right? So they're still super popular. So if you put this movie out where they're not like about this
Right.
like
Yeah.
creepy ass Raggedy Ann doll, nobody's gonna want to buy a Raggedy Ann doll anymore, or
Right.
the creepos are gonna want to buy more. So yeah, so I just it doesn't make sense to me because Robert the doll was so unique.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess they could be afraid of like using his photograph without his permission or whatever, right? So
Yeah, I mean, like, if you're a director that really believes in that, then I probably wouldn't want to use his likeness either.
Yeah, so it's said that, like, when you're at the museum and you wanna take a picture of him, if he says it's okay, then he'll, like, tilt his head, which I don't believe, but whatever, but then if he doesn't tilt his head, then and you take his picture, then he's gonna curse you, and, like, people have gotten into car crashes, they've gotten, like, severely ill, like, they've lost relationships, they've gotten hurt, like,
Oh,
crazy stuff has happened if people don't apologize to him or, like, don't ask him permission, and so that's when the letters come in to be like, "I'm so sorry I did this, please, like, make it stop."
yeah, yeah.
So, just
Interesting.
crazy. Um, staff members have also reported hearing demonic giggling. They've seen his expression change, and he's even put his hand up in the glass,
Oh,
like, put his hand up to the glass because he's in, like, this glass enclosure.
I feel like he should be in the Warrens Museum.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, and I just feel like they were better equipped to handle like kind of evil, demonic things like that.
Oh, probably, but who knows? Um, he's taken out once a year from his case to be examined to ensure that the humid Florida weather has not affected his straw-filled body. So they just want to make sure that everything's kosher there.
It's like his little doctor's appointment.
Exactly, once a year. The same curator will occasionally respond to letters, especially those written by children, and she keeps up with Robert's social media presence as well.
What child is writing to this doll?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I don't even know. It's creepy.
It's not like you're writing to
The
Santa.
whole thing is just super creepy. I know. Just a creepy haunted doll.
Yeah, whatever.
Which I feel like my child's gonna do that one day because I'm gonna make her, like, super into creepy
I
stuff,
feel
but
like you're gonna be like sitting there writing one
she's gonna
with
be like
her.
probably. Bring her on, like, the haunted walks with us every year and
Oh, ouch.
oh, my child's gonna grow up to be weird.
She doesn't stand a chance.
You never did. Okay, I have one more point. Even after 117 years of existence, Robert seems to still carry a powerful energy, and visitors have said that their electronics malfunction around him.
Oh.
Like they'll like if he doesn't give them permission and they take a picture, then they like will find out later that all their trips photos are gone and like there's no way to recover them and just like everything is lost. So
Don't like that creepy guy.
no, and that's a story on Robert's doll.
Yay! Super creepy.
Yes. I found it to be very creepy.
Yeah. And
So
speaking of creepy, we are getting into October, which is, spooky season. So we've got a lot of really fun, spooky, creepy stories coming for the month of October because that's kind of our time to shine. So stay tuned for all of those.
like scared for some of the stories I'm doing. They creep me out so much.
Yeah, they'll be awesome. So
Yeah.
definitely stay tuned. If you have any suggestions, you can always contact us on social media. We are Histories and Mysteries, all spelled out, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok now. And you can email us at historiesandmysteries515@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you in any capacity. And if you love listening to us, if you could go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, if that's where you listen to us, we would super appreciate it. It would really help us out, and we would love it so much. And we love all of you, and we hope that you continue to listen.
Thanks everybody. Have a great week.